In the glittering Sapphire Ballroom, amidst a swirl of 1930s elegance, a scream shatters the night. Lady Evelyn Marwood lies dead, her priceless sapphire necklace stolen, a single wound betraying a calculated killer. Enter Hercule Poirot, whose little gray cells unravel a web of secrets, a desperate stepson, a scheming financier, a vengeful widow, and a loyal secretary hiding a fatal fear. As clues, a blood-stained glove, a pearl earring, a cryptic note emerge. Poirot exposes a truth where loyalty masks betrayal and greed conceals panic. In this dance of deception, only one question remains. Who struck the fatal blow? Chapter 1. The Glitter of the Sapphire Ballroom. The Sapphire Ballroom, an opulent jewel in London's Mayfair, shimmered with a radiance that belied the chill of the autumn evening in 1932. Its lofty ceilings, adorned with frescoes of cherubs and gilded vines, caught the glow of a dozen crystal chandeliers, each prism scattering light across the polished parquet floor. The air was thick with the scent of tuberose and the murmur of cultured voices, punctuated by the delicate clink of champagne flutes. It was the night of Lady Evelyn Marwood's annual gala, a spectacle that drew the cream of society, and among the throng stood Hercule Poirot, his small, precise figure, a study in elegance amidst the whirl of silk and satin. Poirot's presence was no accident. He had been summoned by Inspector Japp, who, over a hurried lunch at Simpson's, had confided a vague unease about the evening's festivities. "Something's off, Poirot," Japp had muttered, his fork poised over a slice of roast beef. "Lady Marwood's been dropping hints about trouble. Nothing concrete, mind you, but I'd feel better with you there." Poirot, ever intrigued by the prospect of human intrigue, had accepted with a courteous nod, though his green eyes had gleamed with anticipation. Now, as he stood by a marble pillar, a glass of untouched mineral water in hand, Poirot observed the scene with the meticulous care of a watchmaker. Lady Evelyn Marwood, the hostess, moved through the crowd like a queen, her silver gown flowing as if kissed by moonlight. Her sapphire necklace, a cascade of gems that seemed to hold the ocean's depths, drew gasps from those nearby. At 42, she retained a striking beauty, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, but Poirot noted a tightness about her mouth, a flicker of strain in her hazel eyes. She paused to greet a guest, her laughter bright but fleeting, like a note struck on a cracked bell. Near the bar, her stepson, Richard Marwood, cut a brooding figure. His dark hair was disheveled, his dinner jacket slightly creased, as if he had dressed in haste. At 25, he carried the air of a man burdened by debts and disappointment. Poirot recalled Japp's mention of Richard's gambling habits, a vice that had drained the family's coffers. The young man's gaze followed his stepmother with a mixture of resentment and desperation, his fingers tightening around a tumbler of whiskey. Across the room, Miss Clara Henshaw, Lady Marwood's private secretary, stood apart, her plain black dress a stark contrast to the vibrant gowns around her. Her mousy hair was pinned tightly, and her eyes darted about as she scribbled in a small leather notebook. Poirot's lips curved slightly. Such diligence in a social setting suggested more than mere devotion to duty. Was she recording the banalities of the evening, or something more clandestine? His attention shifted to a newcomer, a tall man with the sleek confidence of a panther. Mr. Victor Langston, a financier of dubious repute, had arrived in London only months ago, trailing whispers of shady dealings in Paris and Vienna. His tailored suit and easy smile disarmed many, but Poirot's keen senses detected a predator's watchfulness. Langston leaned close to Lady Marwood, his voice low, and she responded with a guarded nod before turning away. The orchestra, tucked into an alcove, launched into a lilting waltz, and couples swept onto the dance floor. Poirot's gaze lingered on Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a society widow whose emerald earrings flashed as she tilted her head to whisper to a companion. Her sharp features and sharper tongue were well known, and Poirot recalled a rumor that Lady Marwood had once publicly snubbed her over a trivial matter, sparking a feud that still smoldered. As the clock on the mantel chimed 11, the music faltered. A woman's scream, high and piercing, cut through the melody like a blade. The dancers froze, and the crowd parted to reveal a ghastly tableau. Lady Evelyn Marwood lay crumpled on the floor, her silver gown fanned out like a fallen petal. The sapphire necklace was gone, and a thin line of blood traced a path from her temple, pooling on the parquet. Poirot was at her side in an instant, his small hands steady as he checked for a pulse. There was none. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, his voice a soft lament. "It is murder." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs, but Poirot's mind was already at work, cataloging the scene, the precise wound, the missing jewels, the open terrace doors beyond. He rose, his mustache quivering slightly, and met the eyes of the assembled guests. Somewhere among them, he knew, lurked a killer, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The Sapphire Ballroom, so recently alive with music and laughter, now lay under a pall of dread. The chandeliers still glittered, but their light seemed harsh, casting long shadows across the polished floor where Lady Evelyn Marwood's body had fallen. The guests, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion, had been ushered into the adjoining salon, where murmurs of unease rippled like a restless tide. Hercule Poirot stood near the body, his small, neat figure a beacon of calm amidst the chaos. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the scene with the precision of a surgeon, noting every detail, every anomaly. Inspector Japp arrived within the hour, his overcoat slightly askew, his expression one of grim determination. "Poirot, you old fox," he said, his voice low as he knelt beside the body. "What have we here?" Poirot's mustache twitched, but he did not reply immediately. Instead, he bent closer, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound at Lady Marwood's temple. It was small, almost delicate, a single puncture that suggested a weapon both sharp and slender. No such instrument lay nearby, and the absence of the sapphire necklace, its clasp torn as evidenced by a faint scratch on her neck, pointed to theft. Yet Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, whispered that this was no simple robbery. "The blow was precise, mon ami," Poirot said at last, straightening, "not the work of a panicked thief, but of one who knew exactly where to strike." Japp frowned, rubbing his chin. "You think it's personal, then? Someone in that crowd?" He gestured toward the salon, where the guests' voices rose in a nervous hum. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mais oui, Inspector. The truth lies among them, hidden in their glances, their silences." The ballroom was sealed, its heavy doors guarded by 2 constables. Japp's men began their methodical work, dusting for fingerprints and questioning the staff. Poirot, however, preferred to observe. He moved to the spot where Lady Marwood had fallen, near a velvet-draped alcove, partially obscured by a potted palm. The orchestra's stand, now silent, stood at an angle that would have blocked the view from much of the room. The terrace doors, flung open to admit the cool night air, offered a potential escape route, though the gravel path beyond showed no clear footprints. Poirot's first interview was with Mr. Grayson, the butler, a man whose rigid posture and impeccable manners suggested a lifetime of service. His face was pale, but his voice steady as he recounted the evening. "No one left the ballroom after the scream, sir," he said, his eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "I was stationed by the main entrance, and the terrace doors were in my line of sight." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And before the scream, monsieur, did you notice anything unusual?" Grayson hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "There was an argument earlier, Mr. Richard Marwood and her ladyship, near the bar, about 10:30. He was agitated." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. "Agitated, you say? Over what matter?" Grayson shook his head. "I couldn't hear, sir, but his voice was raised and she looked displeased." Next, Poirot spoke with Elsie, a young maid with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. She stood twisting her apron, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Mr. Richard shouting at her ladyship," she confessed. "Something about money, I think. He said she was ruining him." Her cheeks flushed as she added, "And Mr. Langston, he was with her ladyship just before the music stopped. They were talking by the alcove, very close." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Close, mademoiselle? In what manner?" Elsie stammered. Not improper, sir. Just intent, like they didn't want anyone to hear." In the salon, the guests were a study in contrasts. Richard Marwood slouched in a chair, his tie loosened, a fresh glass of brandy in hand. His eyes, bloodshot and defiant, avoided Poirot's scrutiny. Clara Henshaw sat ramrod straight, her notebook clutched like a shield, her lips pressed into a thin line. Victor Langston leaned against a wall, his handsome features composed, though Poirot noted the faint tension in his jaw. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her emerald earrings catching the light, whispered to a companion, her sharp eyes darting toward Clara with what Poirot suspected was malice. Poirot approached Clara first, his manner gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, you were most diligent with your notebook this evening. What did you record?" Clara's fingers tightened on the leather cover. "Just notes for her ladyship, guest lists, instructions for the staff." Her voice faltered, and Poirot tilted his head. "And nothing more? No confidences from Lady Marwood?" Clara shook her head too quickly, and Poirot made a mental note of her unease. Richard Marwood was less forthcoming. "Yes, I argued with Evelyn," he snapped, his voice thick with resentment. "She was cutting me off, said I'd squandered enough of her money, but I didn't kill her." He drained his glass, his hands trembling. Poirot observed the sweat beading on his brow, the slight twitch of his fingers. "Where were you, monsieur, when the scream was heard?" Richard's eyes flickered. "On the terrace, having a smoke. I needed air after our row." Victor Langston, when approached, exuded a cool confidence that bordered on arrogance. "I spoke with Lady Marwood about a business matter," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Nothing more. I was by the orchestra when the scream rang out. Ask anyone." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "And this business matter, monsieur, it was of no consequence?" Langston's gaze hardened. A private investment. She was interested, that's all. Mrs. Langley, eager to insert herself, approached Poirot with a predatory smile. "That Henshaw girl," she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. "She was always hovering around Evelyn, scribbling in that book. And Richard, such a temper. Everyone knows he's in debt up to his ears." Poirot listened, his expression bland, but his mind catalogued her words. Gossip, he knew, often held a kernel of truth, but it was a kernel buried in spite. As the night wore on, Poirot returned to the ballroom, his cane tapping softly on the floor. He stood where Lady Marwood had fallen, reconstructing the moment in his mind. The alcove, the palm, the open terrace doors, all suggested a crime of opportunity, yet the precision of the wound spoke of intent. He crouched, his eyes catching a glint beneath a chair. A single pearl earring, its mate missing. It was not Lady Marwood's, for she had worn sapphires. Poirot pocketed it, his little gray cells humming with possibilities. Japp joined him, his notebook filled with preliminary findings. "No fingerprints on the body, no weapon yet," he said, frustration evident. "And that necklace, worth a king's ransom. You still think it's not about the jewels?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The necklace, mon ami, is a curtain behind which the true motive hides. We must look beyond it." As the constables continued their search, Poirot's gaze lingered on the salon door, where the suspects waited. Each face, each gesture, held a piece of the puzzle. The night was young, and Hercule Poirot was only beginning to unravel the threads of this deadly dance. Chapter 3. The Missing Necklace. The morning after the tragedy at the Sapphire Ballroom dawned gray and heavy, the clouds over London mirroring the somber mood within the Marwood residence. Hercule Poirot sat in Lady Evelyn Marwood's study, a room of understated grandeur with its mahogany desk, shelves of leather-bound books, and a single window overlooking a fog-draped garden. The air carried the faint scent of lavender, a remnant of Lady Marwood's presence, now extinguished. Inspector Japp paced near the fireplace, his boots scuffing the Persian rug, while Poirot's fingers rested lightly on the arms of a velvet chair, his mind as sharp as the ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel. The sapphire necklace, that dazzling cascade of gems, remained the most tantalizing clue, or, as Poirot suspected, the most deceptive. Japp had summoned a locksmith to open the safe embedded in the study wall, a squat iron box hidden behind a portrait of Lady Marwood's late husband. When the door creaked open, it revealed only a stack of legal documents, a few banknotes, and a velvet pouch containing a single diamond brooch. No necklace. "Blast it," Japp muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. If it was stolen, why not take the brooch too? And if it wasn't theft, why take it at all? Poirot's eyes gleamed with that peculiar light that signaled his little gray cells at work. "Precisely, mon ami. The necklace is not merely a prize, it is a symbol, a misdirection. The murderer wishes us to chase the obvious, while the truth lies elsewhere." He rose, his movements precise, and approached the desk, where a silver inkstand and a blotter bore traces of Lady Marwood's meticulous hand. A single sheet of notepaper, half hidden beneath a ledger, caught his eye. It bore a scrawled word, "Exchange," in a script that did not match the elegant penmanship of the other documents. Poirot tucked it into his pocket, his expression inscrutable. Their first task was to question the suspects more thoroughly, and Poirot began with Clara Henshaw, who was summoned to the study. She entered, her face pale, her mousy hair pulled into a severe bun that did little to soften her anxious demeanor. Her black dress, though neatly pressed, seemed to hang on her like a shroud. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his voice soft but insistent, "you were close to Lady Marwood. She trusted you with her secrets, n'est-ce pas?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap, her notebook absent for the first time. I managed her correspondence, her appointments," she said, her voice barely audible. "Nothing more." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And the will? Did she speak of it?" Clara's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. "She mentioned it once," she admitted. "She was revising it. She said Mr. Richard was unreliable. She planned to leave him nothing." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And to whom would her fortune pass?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "She didn't say, only that it would be settled soon." Jap, standing by the window, snorted. "Settled, eh? Sounds like motive to me." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, Inspector. Motive is a shadow until we see its shape." He dismissed Clara, noting the tremor in her step as she left. Next came Richard Marwood, who slouched into the room with the air of a man expecting a firing squad. His eyes were bloodshot, his collar stained with last night's brandy. "I didn't kill her," he said before Poirot could speak, his voice raw. "Yes, we fought. She was going to cut me off, leave me to rot. But I was on the terrace when it happened. Ask the footman." Poirot's smile was thin. "The footman, monsieur, recalls seeing you enter the ballroom after the scream, not before. Where were you truly?" Richard's jaw tightened, but he offered no reply, only a sullen glare. Victor Langston was a different creature altogether. He entered the study with the confidence of a man accustomed to bending others to his will. His dark hair was slicked back, his gray suit immaculate, but Poirot noted a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot began, "you spoke with Lady Marwood before her death. A business matter, you said. Yet I hear whispers of failing ventures, of debts unpaid." Langston's smile was a blade, sharp and cold. "Rumors, Monsieur Poirot. Lady Marwood was a shrewd investor. We discussed a new opportunity, nothing more." Poirot tilted his head. "And your whereabouts at the moment of the scream?" Langston's eyes flickered. "Near the orchestra, as I told you. The violinist can confirm it." Poirot dismissed him, his mind turning to the notepaper in his pocket. The word exchange suggested a transaction, perhaps a secret one. Had Lady Marwood been entangled in Langston's schemes? Or was there another layer, one buried deeper? He requested to see the ballroom again, and Jap, grumbling about Poirot's penchant for theatrics, accompanied him. The ballroom, in daylight, was less magical, its grandeur muted by the absence of music and laughter. Poirot paced the floor, reconstructing the fatal moment. The alcove, where Lady Marwood had fallen, was partially hidden by a heavy curtain, its folds offering cover for a swift act. The terrace doors, still ajar, led to a gravel path that wound into the garden. Poirot knelt, his eyes scanning the floor, and found a tiny speck of blue thread caught in a crack near the alcove. It was not from Lady Marwood's silver gown, nor from the staff's uniforms. He pocketed it, his mind racing. Back in the study, Jap reported a new discovery. A maid had found a silk glove, stained with a single drop of blood, tucked behind a cushion in the salon. It was a lady's glove, finely made, but its owner was unclear. "Could belong to half the women here," Japp said, exasperated. Poirot's gaze was distant. "Or it could belong to one, Inspector, who wished to conceal her hand." As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused by a photograph on the desk, a portrait of Lady Marwood with a younger Clara, both smiling in a garden. The image was tender, almost maternal, yet Clara's reticence suggested a relationship more complex than loyalty. Poirot's fingers brushed the frame. "There is a secret here," he murmured, "and it is not only the necklace that hides it." Japp, impatient, clapped his hands. "Right then. What's next, Poirot? We've got a missing necklace, a dead woman, and a room full of liars." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Next, mon ami, we listen to the silences. They speak louder than words." He adjusted his hat, his mind already weaving the threads of motive and opportunity into a pattern only he could see. Chapter 4. A Web of Motives. The fog that cloaked London had thickened by the afternoon, wrapping the Marwood residence in a grey shroud that seemed to mirror the tangled motives Hercule Poirot now sought to unravel. He sat in his modest flat at Whitehaven Mansions, a steaming cup of tisane before him, its fragrance a faint comfort against the chill of the case. The sapphire necklace, the blood-stained glove, the cryptic note with the word "exchange." Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly to discern its pattern. Across from him, Inspector Japp sprawled in an armchair, his notebook open, his brow furrowed as he recounted the morning's findings. "The glove's a puzzle," Japp said, tapping his pencil against the page. "Silk, fine quality, but no monogram, no clear owner. Could be anyone's. Mrs. Langley, Miss Henshaw, even a guest we haven't considered." Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes half closed. "It is not the glove itself, mon ami, but what it conceals. A hand that struck, perhaps, or one that wished to appear innocent." Japp grunted, unconvinced. "And that blue thread you found? Could be from a dress, a coat, anything. This case is like chasing smoke." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Smoke, Inspector, reveals the fire if one knows where to look." He set down his cup and leaned forward, his voice precise. "Let us consider the relationships, the currents beneath the surface. Lady Marwood was a woman of influence, but also of secrets. To understand her death, we must understand her life." He began with Clara Henshaw, the secretary whose nervous demeanor and guarded answers hinted at more than loyalty. Poirot had learned, through discreet inquiries, that Clara had been with Lady Marwood for 5 years, a trusted confidant who managed not only schedules, but sensitive correspondence. A housemaid had mentioned Clara's dream of studying art in Paris, a dream Lady Marwood had promised to fund. Yet Clara's agitation suggested fear, perhaps of a secret exposed. "She is devoted," Poirot mused, "but devotion can mask desperation." Richard Marwood, the stepson, was a clearer case of motive. His gambling debts, rumored to exceed £10,000, had strained his relationship with Lady Marwood to breaking point. The will, as Clara had revealed, was to exclude him entirely, a decision that would leave him destitute. His claim of being on the terrace during the murder remained unverified, and Poirot noted his volatility, a man capable of rash action, if not cold calculation. Victor Langston, the financier, presented a more elusive figure. Poirot had uncovered whispers of his failing ventures, a shipping company in Marseille, a speculative mine in South Africa that relied heavily on Lady Marwood's investments. The word exchange on the note paper suggested a transaction, perhaps a demand for more funds or a threat to reveal her involvement in his schemes. Langston's alibi, supported by a vague nod from the orchestra's violinist, was flimsy at best. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the table. "This man, he plays a game of shadows," he said, "but shadows leave traces." Mrs. Beatrice Langley, the society widow, was a less obvious suspect, yet her bitterness toward Lady Marwood was palpable. A decade earlier, at a charity ball, Lady Marwood had publicly mocked Beatrice's choice of gown, a slight that had fueled a vendetta whispered about in drawing rooms. Beatrice's sharp tongue and keen observation made her a dangerous player, and Poirot recalled her pointed remark about Clara's notebook. Was she merely stirring trouble, or did she know more than she let on? Poirot rose, pacing the room with measured steps, his cane a soft metronome against the floor. He returned to the ballroom in his mind, reconstructing the fatal moment. The alcove, half hidden by the curtain and palm, offered a perfect stage for a swift, silent act. The open terrace doors suggested an escape, yet the absence of footprints on the gravel path puzzled him. The blue thread, too fine for a coat, might belong to a gown or shawl. But whose? And the glove? Its single drop of blood hinted at a careful attempt to avoid leaving prints, yet its discovery behind a cushion suggested haste or oversight. He paused by the window, gazing into the fog. "The murderer is clever," he said, almost to himself, "but not infallible. The necklace, the glove, the thread, these are not accidents. They are clues to a mind that plans, yet falters under pressure." Japp leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "So, what's your next move, Poirot? We can't keep the guests locked up forever." Poirot turned, his eyes bright. "We return to the house, mon ami. I wish to see the terrace again, and to speak with the staff once more. There is one who knows more than she says." Japp raised an eyebrow. "Elsie, the maid. She's a nervous wreck." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Nervous, yes, but observant. The eyes of the servants see what the guests do not." That afternoon, they returned to the Marwood residence, where the air was heavy with the scent of wax polish and unspoken tension. Poirot requested Elsie's presence in the drawing room, a space less formal than the study, its walls adorned with watercolors of pastoral scenes. Elsie entered, her apron crisp, but her hands twisting nervously. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle, "you spoke of Mr. Langston and Lady Marwood by the alcove. Tell me, what was their manner? Their words?" Elsie's cheeks flushed, her eyes darting to Japp, who nodded encouragingly. "They were close, sir," she said, her voice low. "Not improper, but secretive. I heard Mr. Langston say something about the terms must be met. Her ladyship looked angry, said he'd gone too far." Poirot's mustache quivered. "And where were you when you heard this?" Elsie hesitated. "By the service door, sir, clearing glasses. I wasn't eavesdropping, I swear." Poirot raised a hand, his smile reassuring. "You have done well, mademoiselle. One last thing. Did you see Miss Henshaw near the alcove that evening?" Elsie frowned, thinking. "Not there, sir, but she was by the terrace doors earlier, fetching a shawl for her ladyship. She looked upset." Poirot thanked her, his mind cataloguing the detail. Clara's presence near the terrace, combined with her knowledge of the will, painted a picture of opportunity, if not intent. As they left the drawing room, Poirot paused by a side table where a vase of wilting roses stood. A single petal had fallen, and he lifted it, noting its delicate texture. "Like the truth," he murmured. "Fragile, yet it leaves a mark." Japp, trailing behind, sighed. "You and your metaphors, Poirot, give me a solid lead any day." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Patience, Inspector. The lead is there, in the web of motives. We need only pull the right thread." Chapter 5. The Alibi Unravels. The Marwood residence, bathed in the pale light of an overcast afternoon, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot orchestrated his next move. The drawing room, with its soft furnishings and muted watercolors, had become a stage for revelation, and Poirot, ever the maestro, had summoned the principal players, Clara Henshaw, Richard Marwood, Victor Langston, and Mrs. Beatrice Langley, under the guise of a police update. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his broad shoulders tense, while Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, surveyed the suspects with the calm precision of a chess master contemplating a critical move. His cane rested against his knee, and his green eyes, sharp as polished jade, missed nothing. The room was heavy with anticipation, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of a carriage clock. Poirot began, his voice measured, each word chosen with care. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed, a life extinguished in the midst of revelry. But the truth, it hides not in the shadows, but in the light of what you conceal." He paused, noting Clara's tightened grip on her chair, Richard's restless shifting, Langston's studied nonchalance, and Mrs. Langley's pursed lips, as if she savored the drama. Japp took the floor, his tone gruff as he recounted the known facts. Lady Marwood's death by a single, precise blow to the temple, the missing sapphire necklace, the blood-stained glove found in the salon, and the blue thread near the alcove. The guests stirred, their glances darting like moths around a flame. Poirot watched closely, his mind cataloging their reactions. Clara's face paled at the mention of the glove, Richard's jaw clenched, Langston's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, and Mrs. Langley's eyes gleamed with something akin to satisfaction. Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the room. "Let us consider the moments before the tragedy," he said, pacing slowly. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, you were seen near the terrace doors, fetching a shawl for Lady Marwood. Is this correct?" Clara nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, she was chilly. I went to the cloakroom and returned just before it happened." Her eyes flickered to Mrs. Langley, who leaned forward, her voice sharp. "I saw her, Monsieur Poirot, lingering by those doors far longer than a shawl would require." Clara flushed, her protest drowned by Mrs. Langley's triumphant smirk. Poirot turned to Richard Marwood, whose disheveled appearance had worsened, his tie now a crumpled knot. "Monsieur Marwood, you claim you were on the terrace, smoking, at the time of the scream. Yet a footman places you entering the ballroom after the cry, not before." Richard's face reddened, his voice rising. "He's mistaken. I was outside, I swear it. I needed air after Evelyn's threats to ruin me." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Threats, monsieur? Or desperation, knowing your inheritance was lost?" Before Richard could respond, Poirot produced the pearl earring he had found near the body, holding it aloft like a talisman. "This," he said, "was dropped where Lady Marwood fell. It is not hers, for she wore sapphires. To whom does it belong?" The room fell silent, but Clara's hand rose instinctively to her ear, then dropped as if burned. Poirot's mustache quivered. "Mademoiselle, you have lost something, perhaps?" Clara stammered. I wore no earrings that night. I never do." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, but his mind noted the lie. He turned to Japp, who produced a new piece of evidence, a chemist's report procured that morning, identifying the murder weapon as a broken syringe, its glass shard matching the wound's precision. "A curious choice," Poirot said, his eyes sweeping the room. "One that suggests knowledge of Lady Marwood's household, for she required such instruments for her heart condition." Clara's breath hitched, and Poirot pressed gently. "Mademoiselle, you managed her ladyship's medical supplies, did you not?" Clara nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, but I kept them locked in the study. I checked them daily. None were missing." Poirot's smile was almost kind. "And yet, one is gone, used to end a life. Curious, non?" The focus shifted to Victor Langston, whose composure had begun to crack, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. Poirot's voice was soft but cutting. "Monsieur Langston, you spoke of terms with Lady Marwood, as overheard by a maid, terms that angered her. Were these terms financial or something more compromising?" Langston's smile was tight. "Business, as I said. She was a cautious investor, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the word exchange, does it mean nothing to you?" Langston's hand stilled, but he shook his head. "You chase phantoms, Monsieur Poirot." Mrs. Langley, unable to resist, interjected. "If you ask me, that Henshaw girl was far too close to Evelyn, always scribbling, always listening, and Richard, his debts are no secret. Either of them could have snapped." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the relish in her tone. "Madame, your observations are most illuminating," he said, his politeness masking a deeper scrutiny. As the meeting dispersed, Poirot requested a private word with Elsie, the maid, in the hallway. Her eyes were wide, her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you saw Mr. Langston and Lady Marwood by the alcove. Did you see anyone else near them, perhaps with a syringe?" Elsie shook her head, then hesitated. I saw Miss Henshaw with a tray of glasses passing close to the alcove earlier. She looked nervous, like she was watching them." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a gentle smile. Alone with Japp, Poirot examined the glove again, its silk delicate but stained with that damning drop of blood. "The syringe, the glove, the earring," he murmured. "They are pieces of a puzzle, but the picture is not yet clear." Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're seeing things I don't, Poirot. Richard's alibi is shaky, Clara's hiding something, and Langston's too smooth by half. But where's the proof?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Proof, mon ami, is in the details. The earring places someone at the scene, the glove suggests caution, and the syringe, it speaks of intimacy with the victim's habits. We must dig deeper into the heart of their secrets." He adjusted his lapel, his mind already turning to the next step, a closer examination of Clara's possessions and Langston's cryptic exchange. The web of alibis was fraying, and Poirot was determined to pull a final thread. Chapter 6. The Hidden Truth. The Marwood residence, now a silent monument to tragedy, seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot stood in its shadowed library, the scent of old leather and wax lingering in the air. The late afternoon light filtered through heavy drapes, casting a muted glow on shelves laden with tomes and curios. Poirot's small, immaculate figure was a stark contrast to the room's somber grandeur, his cane tapping softly as he paced, his mind a whirl of connections. Inspector Japp, ever practical, leaned against a bookcase, his arms crossed, awaiting Poirot's next revelation. The clues, the pearl earring, the blood-stained glove, the blue thread, the cryptic note, were pieces of a mosaic, and Poirot was determined to see the full picture. He had requested a private interview with Victor Langston, who arrived promptly, his tailored suit as impeccable as ever, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot gestured to a chair, his manner courteous but unyielding. "Monsieur Langston," he began, his voice a velvet blade, "you have been most elusive about your dealings with Lady Marwood. The word exchange, found in her study, suggests a transaction of significance. Will you enlighten us, or shall we continue to chase shadows?" Langston's smile was a mask, thin and brittle. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, it was business, investments, nothing more. Lady Marwood was a partner in several ventures, and we discussed terms for a new one." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight tremor in Langston's hand. "And these terms," he pressed, "they angered her, did they not? A maid overheard you speak of demands she found excessive." Langston's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "She was cautious, as always. We parted on civil terms." Poirot produced the torn notepaper, its single word, "exchange," stark against the cream page. "This is your hand, monsieur, is it not?" Langston's gaze flickered, but he shook his head. "Many hands write similar scrawls. You have no proof it's mine." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing certainty. "Proof, monsieur, is in the pattern, and the pattern suggests you sought more than money from Lady Marwood. Perhaps her silence?" Langston rose abruptly, his voice cold. "You overstep, Poirot. I had no reason to harm her." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Then why, monsieur, did you take the necklace?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Langston froze, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "I took nothing," he said, but the words lacked conviction. Poirot dismissed him, his mind noting the crack in the financier's armor. Turning to Japp, Poirot murmured, "He hides much, this one, but he is not our killer. The necklace was a feint, a distraction from a deeper motive." Japp frowned, unconvinced. "Then who, Poirot? Richard's alibi is crumbling, and Clara's jumpy as a cat. You can't suspect Mrs. Langley. She's all talk." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "All talk, mon ami, reveals what silence conceals. But first, we must explore Mademoiselle Henshaw's secrets." With Japp's reluctant permission, Poirot requested a search of Clara's quarters, a small room on the third floor, Spartan compared to the opulence below. The search, conducted by a discreet constable, yielded a discovery. Beneath a loose floorboard, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a letter in Lady Marwood's elegant script. Poirot read it aloud, his voice soft but resonant. "My dear Clara, your loyalty has been my solace, and I shall ensure your dreams are realized. Study in Paris, as you desire, but you must keep my confidence regarding the matter we discussed. Betrayal would be unfortunate." Japp's eyebrows shot up. Blackmail? Was Clara holding something over her? Poirot's gaze was distant. "Not blackmail, Inspector, but a bargain. Lady Marwood knew a secret about Clara, one she used to ensure loyalty. But what secret?" He pocketed the letter, his mind turning to the syringe, the earring, and Clara's nervous demeanor near the terrace doors. Poirot requested Clara's presence in the library, and she entered, her face ashen, her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle," he began, his tone gentle but probing, "you have been most loyal to Lady Marwood, yet you hide something. This letter suggests she held a power over you. What was it?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. I don't know what you mean. I loved her. She was kind to me." Poirot's voice sharpened. "Kind, yet she demanded silence. About what, mademoiselle? A theft, perhaps? A small indiscretion?" Clara flinched, her breath catching. "I took nothing," she cried, but her voice broke. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "The earring, mademoiselle. It was yours, dropped where Lady Marwood fell. And the syringe. You knew where it was kept. Why did you strike her?" Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "I didn't. I swear it. Yes, the earring is mine. I lost it that night, but I was only fetching her shawl. I wasn't near the alcove when she died." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind remained relentless. "Then tell me, what did she know about you?" Clara's sobs quieted, and she whispered, I took small sums from her accounts, for my art studies. She found out, but instead of dismissing me, she made me watch someone for her." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Watch whom?" Clara's voice was barely audible. "Mr. Langston. She suspected he was cheating her, hiding losses. She wanted proof." Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp, whose skepticism had given way to intrigue. "And did you find this proof?" Poirot asked. Clara nodded, her eyes downcast. "Papers, in his briefcase. I told her the night of the gala. She was furious, said she'd confront him." Poirot dismissed Clara, his mind racing. Langston's financial duplicity, Clara's coerced espionage, the missing necklace, all pointed to a motive rooted not in greed, but in fear of exposure. He turned to Japp, his voice low. "The necklace was taken to suggest theft, but it was Lady Marwood's knowledge that was the true threat. Langston's ventures were failing, and she held the key to his ruin." Japp scratched his head. "So, Langston killed her to keep her quiet, but why the syringe and the glove?" Poirot's smile was faint. "The syringe was opportunity, familiar to someone in the household. The glove was caution, but its hiding was careless. We are close, mon ami. But one piece remains." He paused, his eyes distant. "We must find the necklace. It will lead us to the hand that struck." As they prepared to leave the library, Poirot's gaze fell on a small bronze statue of a dancer, its pose graceful yet frozen. "Like our murderer," he murmured, poised yet trapped by their own act. The truth was near, and Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The Sapphire Ballroom, once a stage for elegance and revelry, now stood as a silent witness to treachery, its chandeliers dimmed, their prisms catching only the faint glow of evening lamps. Hercule Poirot had chosen this room for the denouement, a deliberate echo of the night of the crime, where the truth would be laid bare like a curtain drawn back at the final act. The suspects, Clara Henshaw, Richard Marwood, Victor Langston, and Mrs. Beatrice Langley, were assembled once more, their faces a gallery of apprehension, defiance, and curiosity. Inspector Japp stood by the terrace doors, his arms crossed, while Poirot, immaculate in his black suit, stood at the center of the room, his cane a silent partner in his poised authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. We gather where Lady Evelyn Marwood met her tragic end, not to mourn, but to uncover the hand that struck her down. A murder has been committed, clever in its execution, yet flawed in its concealment. The sapphire necklace, the syringe, the glove, the earring, these are not mere objects, but signposts to a motive rooted in fear and betrayal. He paced slowly, his green eyes sweeping the group. Clara sat rigid, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles gleamed white. Richard slouched, his eyes darting to the floor. Langston maintained his polished veneer, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. Mrs. Langley, her emerald earrings glinting, leaned forward with the eagerness of a spectator at a play. Poirot's mustache quivered slightly, a sign of the clarity now forming in his mind. "Let us reconstruct," he said, pausing by the alcove where Lady Marwood had fallen. The night of the gala, this room was alive with music, yet death waited in the shadows. The blow was precise, delivered with a syringe, a tool of the household, known to those closest to the victim. The necklace was taken, suggesting theft, yet it was not greed that drove this act. None, it was a secret, one Lady Marwood held, that sealed her fate. He turned to Victor Langston, whose composure flickered. "Monsieur Langston, you were entangled with Lady Marwood in ventures that teetered on ruin. She discovered your deceit, papers found by Mademoiselle Henshaw, proving you hid losses. She threatened to expose you, did she not?" Langston's smile was thin, his voice steady. "You weave a tale, Monsieur Poirot, but I was by the orchestra when she died. The violinist confirmed it." Poirot nodded, undeterred. "Oui, but your alibi is fragile, for the orchestra's music masked your movements. You were seen arguing with her, speaking of terms she found unacceptable. Yet I believe you did not strike the blow. Your crime was one of coercion, not murder." Langston's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, his silence louder than words. Poirot's gaze shifted to Richard Marwood, whose sullen demeanor had given way to nervous agitation. "Monsieur Marwood, your debts were a noose, and Lady Marwood's decision to rewrite her will tightened it. You claim you were on the terrace, yet you re-entered the ballroom after the scream, sweating, disheveled. Anger drove you, perhaps, but not to murder. Your fear was real, but your hands are clean." Richard's shoulders sagged, relief mingling with defiance. "I told you, I didn't touch her." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him, and turned to Mrs. Langley, whose sharp features betrayed a hint of unease beneath her bravado. "Madame, your enmity with Lady Marwood was no secret. Your whispers, your pointed remarks, they stirred the waters, but they did not draw blood. You observed, you gossiped, but you did not kill." Mrs. Langley's lips parted in protest, but Poirot's attention had already moved to Clara Henshaw, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you are the key. You loved Lady Marwood, yet you feared her. She discovered your theft, small sums to fund your dream of Paris. She used this to bind you, demanding you spy on Monsieur Langston. That night, she confronted him, armed with your evidence. But it was you who stood near the alcove, you who dropped the earring, you who knew the syringe's place." Clara's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. No, I didn't," she began. But Poirot's voice, gentle yet relentless, cut through. "You did, mademoiselle. In a moment of panic, when she threatened to expose your theft, you struck. The syringe was at hand, its use familiar from her medical needs. You took the necklace not for gain, but to suggest a robbery, to cloud the truth. Where is it now?" Clara's sobs broke the silence, her body shaking. It's in my room, hidden in my valise. I didn't mean to kill her. She was going to ruin me, tell everyone I was a thief. I only meant to stop her, to make her listen." Her confession poured out, a torrent of guilt and fear. She had acted in a blind moment, the syringe a desperate choice, the necklace an afterthought to mislead. Jap stepped forward, his face grim but satisfied. "That's it then," he said, signaling a constable to escort Clara. As she was led away, her sobs echoing, Poirot turned to the others. "Monsieur Langston, your schemes contributed to this tragedy, and the law may yet find interest in them. Monsieur Marwood, your debts remain your burden. Madame Langley, your tongue has done enough." The room emptied, leaving Poirot and Jap alone. The inspector shook his head. "You saw it all, Poirot. The earring, the syringe. How did you know?" Poirot's smile was faint. "The little gray cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see only chaos. Clara's fear, her proximity, her knowledge. It all pointed to her, though she hid it well." He walked to the terrace doors, gazing into the darkening garden. "The necklace was never the prize," he murmured. "It was the secret, the fear of exposure, that drove the hand." Jap clapped him on the shoulder. "Another case solved, you old devil. Care for a pint?" Poirot's nose wrinkled slightly. "Non, Inspector. A tisane, perhaps, to restore the order of the mind." As they stepped into the evening, the Sapphire Ballroom stood silent, its secrets unveiled, its order restored, at least until the next mystery called Hercule Poirot's name. Chapter 8. The Order Restored. The Sapphire Ballroom, now stripped of its tragic veil, stood hushed in the soft glow of twilight, its chandeliers dark, its polished floor bearing no trace of the blood that had marred it only days before. Hercule Poirot lingered in the vast room, his small, precise figure, a solitary note of calm amidst the echoes of the gala's fatal night. His cane tapped lightly against the parquet, a rhythmic counterpoint to the thoughts swirling in his mind. The case was solved, the murderer unmasked. Yet Poirot's work was never truly complete until he had reflected on the human frailties that wove such dark tapestries. Outside, the London fog had lifted, revealing a sky bruised with the last hues of dusk. Inspector Jap waited by the terrace doors, his overcoat buttoned against the evening chill, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Well, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff but warm, "you've done it again. Clara Henshaw in cuffs, the necklace recovered, and not a loose end in sight. I'd say that's a job well done." Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with a quiet satisfaction. "The job, mon ami, is to restore order where chaos has reigned. Mademoiselle Henshaw acted not from malice, but from fear, a fear that consumed her. Yet justice is served, and the truth is laid bare." He paused, his gaze drifting to the alcove where Lady Marwood had fallen, the scene now as pristine as if no crime had occurred. The necklace, retrieved from Clara's valise, had been returned to the Marwood estate, its sapphires glinting coldly in their velvet case. Poirot had examined it one final time, confirming its authenticity, but noting its role as a mere prop in the drama, a distraction to mask Clara's desperate act. The syringe, too, had been recovered from a hidden drawer in the study, its glass tip stained with the fatal precision of her strike. The blood-stained glove, the pearl earring, the blue thread. All had pointed to Clara, whose panic had unraveled her careful facade. Japp shifted, his boots scuffing the floor. What about Langston? His schemes were shady enough to warrant a closer look. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Oui, Monsieur Langston's ventures will draw the attention of the authorities, I have no doubt. His coercion of Lady Marwood set the stage for tragedy, but he did not wield the weapon. His punishment will come in time. Japp grunted, satisfied. And Richard Marwood? Poor sod still drowning in debt. Poirot's smile was faint. Monsieur Marwood must face his own demons, Inspector. The loss of his inheritance is a lesson, perhaps, in the perils of excess. He thought of Mrs. Beatrice Langley, whose sharp tongue had stirred suspicion, but lacked the substance of guilt. Her role, he mused, was that of the gadfly, irritating but not deadly. The two men stepped onto the terrace, the cool air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. Poirot's mind lingered on Clara, her tearful confession a poignant reminder of human fragility. She had loved Lady Marwood, yet her fear of ruin, sparked by the discovery of her petty thefts, had driven her to a moment of irreversible violence. The letter, promising Paris but demanding silence, had been the chain that bound her, and the syringe, a tool of care turned to destruction, had been her undoing. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder, breaking his reverie. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Those little gray cells of yours, they never miss a trick." Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression one of modest pride. "The gray cells. Mon ami, they see the order beneath the chaos. It is a matter of method, of observing the heart as well as the hand." As they walked into the gathering dusk, the Marwood residence receded behind them, its windows dark, its secrets laid to rest. Poirot's thoughts turned briefly to the photograph in the study. Lady Marwood and Clara, smiling in a moment of unguarded warmth. It was a reminder that even in tragedy, there was humanity, flawed and fragile, but ever compelling. "Care for a spot of supper?" Japp asked, his tone hopeful. Poirot's nose wrinkled slightly at the thought of Japp's preferred haunts. "Non, Inspector. A quiet evening, a tisane, and perhaps a symphony to soothe the mind. The Sapphire Ballroom has played its final note for me." With a final glance at the grand house, Poirot stepped into the night, his cane a steady companion, his mind already open to the next mystery that awaited. For Hercule Poirot, the world was a puzzle, and he would always be its master solver.